old at that time. But he was in good shape.
Right, right.
I'm not Norwegian.
Sorry?
I'm not Norwegian.
You're not, okay.
My wife is Norwegian.
I see. Okay, so she attends the services, or she attends the services when
Oh,
they happen?
But we're part of the Norwegian community.
Right, right.
It's not a big community.
Right.
My wife has been here since 75. It gets all kinds of things.
Yeah.
I find it. It's not.
Well, like I said, my friend would know. Like, if it's the same person who wrote that book, my friend would know. All I have to do is tell him the title.
Well, that guy, everybody knows him. Jesus is good. But he came from Belgium.
Right, right, right.
He didn't come.
I understand. Yeah, he came from
he's
Europe.
Not from
yeah.
Quebec.
Yeah, he's not a Quebecois. Right, right. Okay.
A lot of.
Yeah, I'll talk to my friend and see what's what. Like, it's probably not the same person, but on the other hand, they don't have that many priests up there, you know.
But,
so.
But it's, they have a name here.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't sound like just.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I'll sit down and find it.
Right. Well, I'm going to take a few more photos.
I have to stop doing that because do you have a service today, you think?
Yes, I'm waiting.
Okay,
yeah.
Because maybe it might be the last one before the summer.
I know. Yeah. And if they don't have a service, I'm still protesting. I see one car there. That's yours, I guess. Yeah. All right. So this gentleman was telling me about something related to a Roman Catholic priest up north. And I just have a friend of mine who knows of a Roman Catholic priest up north who basically was, you know, guilty of quite a lot of sexual abuse. So, you know, it may not be the same one, it probably isn't, but, you know, how many Roman Catholic priests up north are there anyway? So we're going to get on with the protest here. So we are protesting against Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse and the cover-up and denial of Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse, amongst other ways, by the Unitarian Universalist Association hiring Stikeman Elliott barristers and solicitors defamation lawyer Maitre Marc-André Coulombe to falsely accuse me of violating Canada's blasphemy law on June 1st of 2012. On June 1st of 2012, I received in my email inbox email from Maitre Marc-André Coulombe. It was just a very terse message, basically said please refer to the attached file or something like that. It had a PDF file attached to it, and that PDF file was of a 2-page cease and desist demand letter, which I was actually served by a bailiff later in the month. In fact, I was only too happy to go to the bailiff's offices and be served with that cease and desist demand letter because it was full of false accusations, and I wanted the paper copy, you know, like I didn't avoid the bailiff at all. I went to the office and signed the papers to show that I'd actually received the cease and desist demand letter. And then I immediately took photos of that cease and desist demand letter outside the offices on a bench. And later I posted the photos to the Emerson Avenger blog. Even before doing that, because that was later in June, I responded to the false accusation in the Emerson Avenger blog post. And of course email sent back to Maitre Marc-André Coulombe. Maitre Marc-André Coulombe's exact words were a very, very close approximation were, your unfounded and vicious allegations to the effect that ministers of the association engage in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape are defamatory. And he went on to say that they were so allegedly defamatory that they amounted to the criminal act of blasphemous libel, which is section 276.3 of the Canadian Criminal Code, or was until recently. Canada's blasphemy law was finally repealed last year while Jody Wilson Raybould, also known as Puglass, was Justice Minister of Canada. So after years of languishing on the books and rarely being used, the blasphemous libel law was removed completely from the Canadian Criminal Code. Canada no longer has a blasphemy law. But that doesn't change the fact that in June of 2012, so just around 7 years ago, I was falsely accused of violating Canada's blasphemy law by the Unitarian Universalist Association, led by the Reverend Dr. Peter Morales administration, and the person who would have been most responsible for falsely accusing me of blasphemous libel, that is for, you know, authorizing and instructing and paying Stikeman Elliott Barristers and Solicitors litigation lawyer, Maitre Marc-Andre Coulombe, to write that letter, was Kathleen K. Montgomery, the Executive Vice President of the Unitarian Universalist Association. It is, or was, the responsibility of the Executive Vice President of the Unitarian Universalist Association to coordinate the work of the Unitarian Universalist Association's legal counsel. Reverend Maitre Marc-Andre Coulombe identified himself as the Unitarian Universalist Association's Canadian attorney in his communications with me. So Kathleen K. Montgomery, a woman, quite possibly a mother, hired this man to try to intimidate me into removing the Emerson Avenger blog post that told the readily verifiable truth about such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell of the Northborough and Westborough congregations in Massachusetts, and also about Richard Buell, a parishioner of Reverend Dr. Victoria Weinstein in First Parish, Norwell, who was charged, tried, and convicted of the forcible rape of preteen girls, including a female family member, but also a neighbor's daughter. So this man, Richard Buell, a parishioner at First Parish, Norwell in Massachusetts, was charged, tried, and convicted of what Maitre Marc-Andre Coulombe describes as such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape, and I blogged about it. And the Unitarian Universalist Association wanted my blog post to disappear so that this would be less known to the public. They falsely accused me of violating Canada's blasphemy law towards that end. I was never actually arrested or charged because it was a completely false accusation. And I made it very, very clear to Maitre Marc-Andre Coulombe and Reverend Dr. Peter Morales and Kathleen K. Montgomery and other top-level Unitarian Universalist Association leaders that I would be only too happy to see them in court over that false accusation. So this is just one of the ways in which Unitarian Universalists attempt to cover up and hide clergy abuse, including such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. Not to mention abuse by Sunday school teachers and music directors and ordinary lay people like Richard Buell. Richard Buell was not, to the best of my knowledge, a minister of the Unitarian Universalist Association. He might have been a religious educator here and there, but he wasn't a minister. So why they threw him into the mix? Oh, I know why they threw him in the mix, because they wanted to hide any and all pedophilia and rape from the public as much as they possibly could. And they're still lying about it. They're still trying to hide it. They won't come clean. I've repeatedly demanded that the Unitarian Universalist Association must A, formally withdraw its false blasphemous libel accusation against me. B, very publicly apologize to me, not to mention to Canadians and victims of Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse for that false accusation. Not to mention actually violating and ending a centuries-old tradition of opposing blasphemy laws. I'll get into that later. The third thing that I expected from the Unitarian Universalist Association to settle that issue was that they needed to identify any and all Unitarian Universalist ministers, not to mention Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers, who were either charged, tried, and convicted of pedophilia and or rape, or who were credibly accused of such despicable crimes, but weren't necessarily charged, tried, and convicted of them. So, essentially demanding that the Unitarian Universalist religious community come clean about its serious clergy sexual abuse problem. And I'm not saying every case of Unitarian Universalist clergy sex abuse is as bad as pedophilia and rape. But they have a certain amount of that, and they're trying to hide it. They're even trying to minimize, you know, how much less serious clergy sexual misconduct they have. You know, an apology for the clergy, well, essentially an apology to victims of clergy sexual misconduct that was delivered at the 2014 General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association. UUA moderator Jim Key said only a small number of Unitarian Universalist ministers were guilty of clergy sexual misconduct. Well, that's a lie. No less than 400 Unitarian Universalist churches have been affected by clergy sexual misconduct of one kind or another. It can be from, you know, the low end of things, of unwanted sexual advances, through ministers, you know, essentially using their congregations as harems, you know, basically having so-called affairs with congregants. But it does, you know, there are a certain number of cases of actual rape, of actual sexual abuse of children, also known as pedophilia. And the Unitarian Universalist Association and the Unitarian Universalist religious community more generally goes to extreme and, quite frankly, foolish lengths to try to hide these things from the public. And they're certainly not coming clean about it to the public, or even within the community. I mean, they're lying to Unitarian Universalists inside the Unitarian Universalist religious community, but in doing so, they're also lying to the public. I just want to make sure that this camera is still recording. It is. So, getting back to things, let's talk about Quebec Crown prosecutors. In the past, Montreal Unitarians have brought false, trumped-up criminal charges against me. The first time that happened was in December of 2000. That's going back a while. That's going back close to 20 years. So on the first Sunday of December of 2000, I was protesting outside the Unitarian Church of Montreal when an SPVM police car with one officer in it pulled up. The officer got out and he told me I was under arrest. In other words, there was no ifs, ands, or buts. He had been ordered to go there and arrest me. He was very nice about it, very polite, very respectful, but he informed me that I was under arrest. When I asked him what for, he said public nuisance. So I was being arrested for public nuisance for protesting against Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse outside the Unitarian Church of Montreal. And I can tell you that at that time, in December of 2000, clergy sexual abuse was on my radar. It was part of my protest. In fact, clergy sexual abuse was part of my protest from very early on. It wasn't in the first few weeks or possibly even the first few months of my protest, but I added it within a year, I'd say, of my protest. I was aware of various cases of clergy sexual abuse, clergy sexual misconduct. I was aware that the Unitarian Universalist Association had badly mishandled complaints of clergy abuse, clergy misconduct, and I thought, well, you know, since a lot of these victims can't speak out because they've been cajoled or coerced or intimidated into signing non-disclosure agreements, confidentiality agreements, I can speak out, I can talk, because I'm not subject to a non-disclosure agreement, I'm not subject to a confidentiality agreement, I can talk about these things. And so I protested, I added that issue to my protest very, very early on. My picket sign saying unsafe sect, which we can see down here, this one. Originally it had a question mark, softening the blow, but this slogan, which obviously is a play on words for safe sex, dates back to 1999. Want to make sure this thing's still recording because we're yeah, okay, still I got lots of time left. So this unsafe sect picket sign, originally with a question mark after it asking, is this sect unsafe, obviously a play on words for the term safe sex, was displayed outside the UUA headquarters in Boston. That is the headquarters of the Unitarian Universalist Association at 25 Beacon Street, Boston, in May of 2000. So certainly by May of 2000, I had actually stood in front of the headquarters of the Unitarian Universalist Association in North America at 25 Beacon Street in Boston, and I displayed that sign, the same slogan but with a question mark after it, and various other signs. You know, I basically said Unitarian Universalists affirm and promote abuse of clergy. I was clearly talking about abuse of clergy. Normally when you say abuse of clergy, the first thing people think of is sexual abuse, sexual misconduct. They don't think in the broader sense of non-sexual abuse by clergy as well. You know, when you say clergy abuse, abuse of clergy, etc., even if you don't throw sex in there, that's the first thing people think of. So I didn't think it was necessary for me to throw the word sex in there because I didn't want to limit it to sexual abuse. I wanted all forms of abuse to be dealt with. So that's why, and so getting back to the use of that slogan and signs like that, they go back to 1999, because I do clearly remember that one of the reasons that I was kicked out of the Unitarian Church of Montreal for protesting against clergy abuse outside the Unitarian Church of Montreal, one of the things they cited was that slogan. They were very, very unhappy about that unsafe sect slogan, if I remember correctly, and I'm pretty sure I do. Okay, I have a little thing.